we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining, whether you're listening live on 96.5 FM The Answer out of Little Rock, Central Arkansas area, or if you're listening online via the live stream from the 96.5 FM TheAnswer.com web stream at the website, or if you're listening via the podcast version or on Krypton Radio, delayed on Krypton Radio. I'm glad just to have you listening. Love to have you. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. This is Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. It's just like any other talk radio. It's like political talk radio. It's like religious talk radio. It's like sports talk radio, but it's Geek Talk Radio. This is where we geek out. And even though it's Shane Plays, it's not always just about games. It's when I play. It's when I have fun with all my geeky stuff like comic books and games and movies and just you name it. But today we are going to be talking about games. Got a very cool game designer on that I'm going to introduce here in a moment who has a cool game and also has some really great game design credits under his belt. Remember, this is live Geek Talk Radio. Go through our housekeeping notes here and then we'll get to the main show. You can call in at 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. Or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. ShanePlays. You can tweet me at Shane Plays. And I love podcasts. This show goes out as a podcast a few days after the live show, but I love live radio too. One of the reasons is for the interactiveness. So people can call in or tweet or message me or whatever, and I always try to work in that into the show. So if you're listening and you would like to talk to my guest or me during the show today, you can do so. It's 501-823-0965 or tweet me at Shane Plays. The show notes for today's show are up right now at shaneplays.com. There's links to news items and there's links to my guest and what he's doing. You can go find out more. Last week's show is archived on the blog. That's so we went over the RPG Codex's 2016 Computer Role-Playing Game of the Year voting results. That was a fun show. Had Matt Barton and Philippe Pepe on for that. And then don't forget the show does go out as a podcast. It goes out on the blog at shaneplays.com. It goes on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and many other fine podcast directories. And last but not least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. We're carried a week delayed on Saturdays and Mondays on Krypton Radio. KryptonRadio.com is SciFi for your Wi-Fi. Now, I got the housekeeping notes out of the way. Let's get into the meat of the show. I've got a very cool guest today. I've been following his work for a few years now. I've been following on Twitter, keeping up with him. I'm just really happy to be talking to him. Rodney Thompson, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Hey, man. Thanks for joining us. This is, folks, if by some chance you don't know, this is Rodney Thompson. He's been involved with, just for a few things to mention, he was with the Star Wars Saga edition role-playing game, 5th edition of D&D, which has been a overwhelming success. He was also one of the co-designers on the Lords of Waterdeep board game, which is an excellent board game. And he's currently, if I'm not mistaken, working as a game designer with Bungie on the Destiny video game. Did I get all that right?
Yes, you did. That was exactly right.
Wow. So you've got quite the career going on there in game design. Not only are you doing a lot of different stuff, but it's all high profile stuff. And the only thing that I have not played would be the Star Wars Saga RPG, but I played everything else and it's all been great. So good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been really fortunate to be able to have a career in game design in the first place, and then also to be able to work on, properties like Star Wars and Dungeons and Dragons that were hugely formative for me as a young kid and growing up and learning to be a gamer. So,
right.
I'm kind of living the dream, and it's hard to argue with that.
Yeah, no, good for you. And in addition to all that, you have a new game that you're getting out there via Kickstarter that we're going to talk about today called Dusk City Outlaws, which is basically, I'm going to give the elevator pitch here, but then you can expand on that if you want. It's like Ocean's 11 in D&D, basically, right? Is that a good elevator pitch?
Yeah, it really is. It's about being a bunch of criminals. It's about planning a heist or a long con. I often use Ocean's 11 or the TV show Leverage or movies like The Sting as my sort of analog for it. But you're doing that in a massive fantasy city, sort of like Renaissance Venice on the scale of modern-day New York.
Right.
It's so it's all about being crooks and criminals.
Fun. All right. Well, we're definitely going to be talking about that. And I see that the Kickstarter has already funded, so congratulations. But there's always room for more, because then you can add more to the game. And I think you've got, what is it, the 28th that it ends? Is that correct? February 28th?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, going through February 28th.
Okay, so one of the reasons that we're talking today is to give time for people who listen via the podcast and on Krypton Radio to also participate in the Kickstarter if they so choose. So, well, again, thanks for being on. I really appreciate it. Now, when we talked before, your time was somewhat limited, and you thought you might have to leave before the show ends because you've got the real world knocking on your door, and you're making time to come on the show, which I appreciate. So just kind of give me a heads up, a few minutes before you got to go. And what I normally do is I have a news segment that I go through with my guests because it's a lot of fun, and then we get in the interview. But what I've done is I've swapped that this time to get right into the interview. And then,
cool.
Later in the show, I'll do the news segment. So that way, if you've got a drop, we can still, talk about everything that we want to talk about with you. So, well, if you don't mind, I got a couple of questions that are not related to Dusk City Outlaws, and then we'll get heavily into Dusk City Outlaws, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. So I just wanted to ask you a little bit, and I know you've probably answered this stuff in multiple interviews because Lords of Waterdeep has been so successful. I've got a friend that lives a couple of doors down, and he has the game closet. You open it up, and there's all these amazing games in it, and the light shines down, and you hear the angelic voices. And Lords of Waterdeep has a prominent place in that game closet, and we love to play that game. So, and it's been a huge success, not only critically, but commercially, or commercially. Is that even a word? Commercially, how does it feel? Because was that your first board game that you were involved in designing?
It was my first board game, and I had been around some of the other designers who'd been working on the board games at Wizards for a while, but that was my first time taking a crack at it, and it was one of those deals where me and Peter Lee, who was sort of my partner in crime on that game, Peter and I had been talking for a while just about these are the kinds of games that I would like to see more of, or the kind of games that I would like to make. And he had some idea for what would eventually become the quest system. And, I had a basic sketch for, what I wanted out of the game. And it was just sort of a fortunate set of circumstances where we had these disparate ideas, and I was on a train from Seattle to Chicago heading to Gen Con one year, and I just, got the bug, and I started writing this design document. And when I got back from Gen Con, I showed it to Pete, and we put together a prototype, and, it was sort of miraculous. It was really fun from the first playthrough, which almost never happens with a board game.
Right. Well, it's just a fun game. There's people who could care less about the fantasy element that will still enjoy the game, because there's just there's fun mechanics and there's cool stuff going on in it. But I've actually, my local game shop, one of our sponsors is Game Goblins, but I also have a game shop right down the road called Imagine Games, and they have the map from Lords of Waterdeep framed up on the wall. Yeah, so that just shows you the kind of penetration that game got. So. But okay, so that's cool. I enjoy it. Congratulations. I don't know if you have any more board games in your future, but that one's definitely been a lot of fun. I wanted to ask you, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because our main thing is we want to bring visibility to Dusk City Outlaws. But what is your role for at Bungie for the Destiny? I know you're a senior designer for Destiny, but what do you actually get to do for the Destiny video game?
So I'm a game designer, and what that means is that I am designing things that you play in the game. The particular stuff that I work on is the PvE content, the sort of player versus the computer content, and so I'm working on things that you'll actually play. And what that means is not just like coming up with the general idea for you might think of it sort of like level design, right? But not just coming up with that general idea, but also digging into the game engine and making that that happen. And so that involves a lot of like being in our tools and placing things in the world, and then on top of that, doing a lot of scripting and sort of light coding to make those things happen, and sort of coming up with the logic behind, like, okay, when the player does this, then trigger this, or if the player doesn't find the thing they're looking for after a while, turn on a waypoint to point them at it. And so I do all of that stuff, and it's I really think of it sort of like experience design, right? Like when you jump into the game and you start playing, you're going to experience, X amount of time of combat and moving around and exploration and storytelling and hearing dialogue, and all of that combines together to create the total experience. And when I'm doing the game design, what I'm doing is thinking about that experience and crafting each of those elements. And then, I work with a writing team to do the writing, but I also do like the first draft of the dialogue. I do the first draft of all the text that you might see on the screen, and, everything from that to, saying like, hey, these AI need to run over here and shoot this thing, or they need to protect this area, or placing objects in the world. So it's a really broad responsibility, because I'm doing a lot of different things that all combine together to be the thing that you play.
Well, that sounds cool. So how much of a adjustment was it for you personally going from tabletop role-playing design or board game design into video game design?
I was really worried at first, because I had been doing tabletop games for about 15 years and never had shipped a video game, right? But fortunately, when I got there, one of the first things I kind of realized was like, okay, all I've got to do is sort of shift my perception of the tools that I'm using to create experiences. Because having worked on, D&D and other role-playing games, a lot of what you're doing as a dungeon master or game master is coming up with those experiences. It's creating characters and challenges and obstacles and clues and all of these things that are a really, diverse set of elements that go into creating an experience. The only difference between that and the video game design is the tools that you use and the way that you communicate with a player. So obviously on, tabletop games, a lot of it is the words that you use and like the mechanics and the dice and stuff like that. With the video game, I can, play dialogue or put UI elements on the screen, or the way the player interfaces with it is through a controller and their spatial movement. So a lot of it was just sort of shifting my perceptions a little bit, but the rest of it, the game design side of things, is very similar to traditional game design. And I think actually, having come from tabletop games, it really better equipped me to, be prepared to do this kind of game design than if I had come through, like, say, programming or something like that, because it means that I've been thinking about the different ways that, tension and pacing and challenge, all those things combine to affect the player's emotional state. I mean, there's a lot of times where we think about that when we're designing D&D or, a board game. It's just I think of video games as, it's like a board game, but way faster, because you can process so many more things so much more quickly. So yeah, very similar. And I also I have a minor in computer science, so I have some computer background. Now, granted, that was, more than 15 years ago. So, I was a little bit rusty on those things, but I had a little bit of a baseline that I could make the adjustment pretty easily. And, Bungie is a great place to work, and the people there really welcomed me and were excited to have me there. And so they also helped with my transition a lot into the video games. And now I actually feel really comfortable, and I'm, excited that, like, I get to sort of set these visions for experiences that players are going to play.
Right. Well, that's cool. Okay. And I have one final question for you that's not related to Dusk City Outlaws, and then we'll spend the rest of your time talking about that. And let me preface this question. Okay, this is not a 2020 hard-hitting scandal question. My show is not about scandal. It's not about getting dirt. It's none of that. But I am curious about the rhythm of the tabletop game industry. So I noticed that, and I'm not trying to imply anything bad's going on here. I'm just trying to get your insight. I noticed that with, after 5th edition launched, huge success. And, some people have moved on that were integral to 5th edition, yourself. And I'm thinking of like Greg Bilsland off the top of my head, some other names. Is it a normal thing for after a major edition launches that's like, okay, a lot of the core people that were needed for that, it's just kind of naturally time to move on and go do something else? And if this is a question that touches on stuff, I don't want to go anywhere negative, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure.
So, yeah. So you don't even have to answer this if you don't want.
Well, really, the thing is, like, you ask, is this normal? But there's almost no normal in a lot of ways, because you think about, like, D&D. D&D has been around for 40-plus years across two companies, and those two companies were very different at the different points in time when those things were published, right? Like, when Wizards of the Coast first bought D&D from TSR, Wizards was an independent company, and then just a couple of years later, Hasbro buys them out, and so now they're a part of Hasbro, right? So the idea of, like, oh, is this a normal thing? Like, there's not really enough evidence to say what's normal and what's not. I can speak to my own personal experiences. When you work on D&D, you're at the top of the field, right? Like, you're working on the thing that people the world over have heard of. I mean, it's
the Microsoft and the good parts of Microsoft of the role-playing game world.
Yeah, and not only that, but, like, it's a cultural touchstone, right? Like, they make D&D references on primetime television shows, and people laugh and get it, right?
Right.
That is, like, you're at the sort of the apex of tabletop role-playing game culture, and I was really blessed to be able to work on a new edition of D&D. Like, I got to shape the future of Dungeons & Dragons for, an entire generation of players. And so for me, once you finish, doing that, and once I put that out there, like, you can keep working on adventures and supplements and stuff like that. But for me, one of the things that I wanted to do is, obviously, I've worked on tabletop RPGs and board games and now video games. It's pretty clear, like, I like to do a lot of different things, right? Like, I like to explore different game spaces, and, I hugely benefited from my time at Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards was a great place to work. All the people there are brilliant people at the top of their field. Learned a ton. Like, I used to describe, being at Wizards as like, it's like if I went to graduate school for game design in a lot of ways, right?
Oh, okay.
But when the Bungie opportunity came up for me, it was, it's a chance to go work on a new type of video game, right? I was already playing Destiny, so I was super, into the game, but it was a chance to go learn a new thing, right? And I could go there, and also going to Bungie has afforded me the opportunity to work with other companies on games. Like, I worked with Lone Shark Games and Penny Arcade on their Thornwatch game.
Yeah, I saw that mentioned in your Kickstarter, one of the things you've been working on, so...
Yeah, so I got to work on that, and I got to work with friends of mine in the game industry that I'd never gotten to work with before, got to meet a lot of new people, and then now, of course, I'm able to do my own thing and put out Dusk City Outlaws, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd stayed at Wizards. So, for me, a lot of it is just like, I got this huge milestone, this huge career milestone out. Where do you go from there? And for me, that meant, going to explore new frontiers. So I can't really speak to, other people.
Anybody else? Okay.
Yeah, and, like, people have their own lives, their own reasons for going, and, like, there's like, Greg you mentioned Greg Bilson. Greg's a good friend of mine. In fact, I'm going to see Greg either later today or tomorrow, one of the two. And Greg wanted to go work on other things, right?
Gotcha.
Like, that was just his thing. And you could talk to him about it. I'm sure he'd tell you all about it. But people always have their own reasons for moving on. And for me, it was just like, here's a chance to do new things and to do things that I've been wanting to do for years.
All right. Well, I didn't know if it was, and I appreciate that answer. That's why I asked. I love that kind of insight. But, like, I work in IT, and a lot of times when there's a big project, you build up and you work really hard for a couple of years on the project. And then after the project launches, you don't need as many people. So I didn't know if that was a cycle in the role-playing game industry, but it doesn't necessarily sound like that's the case. So
not really. I mean, that's not the way tabletop games work in general. I mean, you hear that from a lot of video game studios, but it's also not the way that some video game studios work. Like, Bungie doesn't work that way. Blizzard doesn't work that way. And, it's a company-to-company thing. That's not really a thing in tabletop games because you don't typically have a hiring ramp-up. You usually use the resources that you have. And I mean, like, look at other gaming companies, right? Like, Paizo or Green Ronin or whatever. You don't really hear about these hiring surges and then fall-offs afterwards. It's not a thing for tabletop games.
Well, that's good. Okay. So just because I'm trying to preserve time for Dusk City Outlaws, that was fascinating. I really appreciate that insight. We're going to take a quick break, because this is radio, so we got to pay the bills. We'll be back in a couple of minutes, and then we're going to talk about nothing but Dusk City Outlaws with Rodney Thompson.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Troll Lord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trolllord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into things we love. It is 1:26 on a overcast day in Little Rock, but people are listening around the world. Rodney, you've got a listener from Argentina. Just want you to know that. Jonas Arganaris, I believe I said that right, said, hey, I'm listening on Twitter. So, Jonas, thanks so much for sending that tweet, and I hope that you find this show today with Rodney fascinating. Yeah, that's one of the cool things about doing this show is we get local... I mean, we get people from all over, listening via the live stream or via podcast. So it's a blend of traditional talk radio and then more of a podcast, kind of thing, which reaches out to a broader audience. So I love doing it. Well, anyway, everybody who's listening, thanks for rejoining us. We're talking with Rodney Thompson, who's a game designer with great credits under his belt, including D&D 5th Edition, Star Wars Saga, RPG, Lords of Waterdeep board game. He's a designer currently at Bungie for the Destiny video game, and he has a cool Kickstarter out for a game called Dusk City Outlaws, which, as we said earlier in the show, is sort of Ocean's 11 in a medieval fantasy RPG world. So it's all based around heists, which is pretty. And I got to be, at first I was like, what? But then I went and read up on it and learned a little bit more. I was like, oh, this sounds really cool. So, and you've got, people should go to the Kickstarter, which is linked at shaneplays.com on the show notes. And there's some live play with like Sam Witwer, who's, kind of a well-known actor in the geek arena, and some others. So people can actually watch a game being played and get an idea of how this goes. But I've said what I'm going to say about it. And Rodney, take it from here and tell us about Dusk City Outlaws.
Sure. Well, this is my first chance to create something of my own, not only design, but also my own world building as well. Like I've always worked on other people's games or other people's IPs. So this is the first thing all my own. And I wanted to make a game that was easy to pick up and pull off the shelf and play. Like, I love RPGs and I love board games, and usually when I have people over for a game night, we always end up defaulting to board games because, like, hey, no one's done any prep work for a D&D game, or, character creation takes a while for this other RPG or whatever, so we end up just playing a board game. And so I wanted to create an RPG that would allow you to do the same thing that you would do with the board game, pull it off the shelf, throw it down on the table, and be playing in like 10 or 15 minutes, right? Like, that's usual about setup time for a lot of board games. So that was sort of the impetus behind it. And when I started thinking about how to make that happen, I realized, the biggest barrier is prep time for the person that's running the game. Like, you have to either create or read an adventure or scenario or whatever that is going to tell you, like, how things are going to go and kind of mentally prepare yourself for the twists and turns. And I realized, like, that's kind of the biggest burden, right? Like, character creation is too, but the biggest burden is the prep time needed to run the game. So I said, okay, what have I got to do to prepare or to make it so that you don't have to prepare as much to run this game? And I realized you got to shift a lot of that preparation, a lot of the stuff that would normally be in the scenario, either into the game or onto the players. And
okay.
So I realized, like, okay, if I'm going to shift things onto the players, I've got to make sure that my players know how to sort of pick up the reins and then run with it, right? And there's a lot of games out there that do a really good job of giving you a call to action. Like Shadowrun is the example I always use for this, because Shadowrun, when you start the first scenario or the first adventure in Shadowrun, you meet with Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Johnson gives you, a job to do, and then you go do that job and you get paid, and then you spend all your money, so you got to get another job from
right.
Mr. Johnson, et cetera, right? But there's always a really clear call to action there. Like, what are you going to do as a player? Well, we're going to go do the job, right? And so I said, like, okay, if I'm going to expect players to drive a lot of the action in this game, they've got to have a clear goal, because without a clear goal, without a clear call to action...
Yeah, if they don't have a clear goal, they're just going to go to the tavern and hope that something breaks out.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
We talk about analysis paralysis in board games, and there's kind of the same thing in a lot of RPGs, where it's like, what do you want to do? You can do anything. And then, like, the scope of that is just so big that you're like, I have no idea what I want to do.
Right.
So with a clear call to action, like go do the thing, like go meet with Mr. Johnson and get your job and then do the job, that takes a lot of the burden off the players to figure out what to do. And then it's about, like, okay, how do we do this thing? And so the genre that fit that the best, I thought, would be like the heist genre or the crime genre, because you always kind of see in your shows like Leverage or like Ocean's 11 or The Sting or whatever, there's always a really clear goal. Like, okay, we're going to rob this casino, or we're going to, rob this guy, or we're going to steal this diamond or whatever. And that's a super clear call to action. And plus, like, heist movies are fun. They're exciting and engaging, and, they bring along a lot of colorful characters, and
right.
Everyone's always their role.
It's a spectacular genre when done right. Right? Yeah. You get colorful characters, and there's no way we can solve this problem, and then they solve it in like this really mind blowing way that seems obvious in retrospect and all that. So.
Yeah, they're also all about teamwork, right?
Right.
Like, it's always about a team that comes together. I mean, there's not a ton of solo heist movies out there, right? Like, it's always the ensemble cast, and that's made for role-playing games, right?
Sure.
And so once I figured that out, it was just a simple matter of, like, saying, okay, what do I need to do to make this happen? And then that's where I get into the mechanical design and also the setting design side of things as well.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that you wanted the sort of sensibilities of a board game in relation to, hey, let's just set it up in 15 minutes and go. Because between reading and researching the Kickstarter, and then also there's a good article in Geek and Sundry about your Kickstarter called "The Designer of Lords of Waterdeep is Kickstarting a Fantasy Heist RPG." Those are both linked on the show notes at shaneplays.com. I was like, this feels like a board game. I mean, I understand it's an RPG, but it feels like it has the spontaneity and the quickness, if you will, of a board game. Now, not all board games are quick. I mean, what's it? Descent into the Underdark game? Boy, that could take forever. But most board games are fairly quick to set up and play. But like when it comes to like, what about it makes it an RPG? For example, I understand that you create your own character. You decide what faction you want to belong to. Does that character continue across multiple adventures? Do you get experience points? Can you improve I mean, how does what kind of RPG elements are in there now that we've established that there's some of the spontaneity of a board game?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, it's going to play like a role-playing game, right? Like, there's one person that runs the game. We call him the judge. It's the game master or dungeon master, right?
Right.
And they're going to, describe a scenario that you set up, and then it's all about, like, player creativity and agency, and, like, you come up with any plan you want to. So the core gameplay is going to feel very familiar to anyone that's played a role-playing game before. As far as, like, persistence and stuff like that, by default, like, I sort of said, okay, I want this game to be pulled off the shelf and played quickly, So that means it's really geared well to like a single session or like 2 sessions of play. But I've also introduced a set of campaign rules in. And so what this is going to do is basically say like, okay, if you want to play this game as your ongoing role-playing game, we've got you covered, right?
Okay.
You're going to make a character like normal, right? You're going to do the job, and at the end of the job, you're going to get respect. And respect is XP, basically. But instead of being applied to your character specifically, respect is applied to the crew as a whole. And it basically says, like, okay, as a crew, you're getting more of a reputation in the city. People have heard of you, and that lets you spend that respect to get certain benefits on subsequent jobs. So basically, it's a resource that you can build up and then spend as you need to. And then there's 2 other elements that are geared towards campaign play. One of them is recurring characters. There's a whole system for recurring NPCs, so that every time a character shows up in the game, and players and the judge alike can introduce that character. But every time a character shows up in the game, they have a bigger and bigger impact until finally they have this sort of climactic, I call it the curtain call, where that character's story gets resolved. And then the other element is story conflicts, which are basically you say, like, okay, my character really cares about the conflict between, his cartel and an opposing cartel.
Yeah,
or
factions play factions play a big part in this game, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And your factions are
like,
called cartels.
Yeah, they're cartels. I mean, like, it could have been guilds, but I wanted to use the word guilds for law-abiding citizens.
Yeah, cartel has much more of a heist feel to it. It's a cartel.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, you can pick like the conflict between 2 cartels, or you could say like, oh, I have a nemesis out there that wants vengeance on me, and then basically every time you introduce that into the story, it progresses a little bit further and a little bit further until finally there's the climactic moment for your particular conflict, and then that ends up being like a big, exciting, dramatic moment, and then you get some benefit from it. So, like, once you resolve one of your story conflicts, you get like a promotion in your cartel, or your personal reputation spreads farther or wider, or you get basically a little stooge that follows you around from that point on. That's sort of how you progress as a character.
Okay. Well, and when it comes to the characters, because I see that. And I'm going back to this Geek and Sundry article, which is a good article. I thought they did a good job. Yeah. It says that when you create your character, you choose. Let's see. Man, I just had this, and of course I've lost it looking at it. It sounds like you pick 2 or 3 the players choose a cartel, and then they choose a specialty. The cartel talks about where the player has influence and where they might look conspicuous. The specialty gives the player special abilities and lays out their skills. So it doesn't sound like there's a traditional strength, dex, con. You're not rolling up attributes and stuff like that.
No, the most important thing for me with the character creation was I wanted you to be able to tell just at a glance what that character was good at. Yeah. And that meant not, hiding things behind a lot of statistics. It was just all very like in your face. The other thing was, because I need you to be able to hit the ground running with this character, all of its abilities that it gets are really big, impactful things. So it's like, okay, instead of giving you like a +1 to this or a +2 to that, it's like, no, you can just automatically succeed at this thing. So it's a lot of bigger, more exciting, more narrative bending abilities.
Yep.
A lot of things that give players control over the narrative.
Okay. So I see here that most stuff is percentage based. So I guess it's 2d10. It's percentage rolls. But then you have challenge dice that you can kind of reflect the twists and turns of a heist with. Are there even, can a character die, or their hit points, or, I mean, is it, I'm trying to get a sense of,
Yeah. So the biggest resource that the players have to husband is time, because you have a limited amount of time to pull off the job. But that said, yes, there is a hit point-like resource called luck. You can, be attacked or make attacks. It depletes your luck, and when your luck runs out, that's when you can start being wounded. Basically, the characters they're pretty simple. They basically have, like, skills, and they have luck, and they have the resource that's called influence that represents, like, their social connections in the city, and then they have their, like, big-ticket special abilities that they have. But that's it. They're not super mechanically intense characters. They're mostly just like, okay, these are things that you then use to pull off your plan or your part in the plan, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, you can absolutely be attacked. You can, attack other people. A lot of the time, though, what you're really doing is basically like, okay, if you're engaged in a fight with somebody or a chase or whatever, if all your luck runs out, you exit the scene, and then maybe you fail to achieve whatever goal you're after in that scene, and that delays you even further or makes things harder for you down the road. And so, like, you're basically looking at, like, okay, we've got X amount of time to pull this job off. If we're not efficient with that time, if we can't get our plan set up and ready to go, it's going to be harder for us to actually pull off that plan. Okay,
so in addition to the characters trying to accomplish stuff through percentile rolls, so you got 2d10s, basically, the percentile dice.
Yep.
You've also got advantage dice and challenge dice. Advantage dice provide opportunities outside of success or failure. And again, I'm going back to the Geek and Sundry article. As an example, perhaps the bank president owes some money to a cartel and can be persuaded to part with the vault key long enough to make a copy. So that's like you're kind of accomplishing something on the side. And then challenge dice reflect the unforeseen twists that make a job more complicated, and they generate heat points, which the GM can spend to throw a monkey wrench in the player's plan. So I want to camp out for a minute on this challenge dice and heat points. I'm seeing this more and more often. I'm thinking right off the top of my head, there's like games that are doing like threat and drama points. So the GM, and I'm thinking like the new Star Trek Adventures RPG, which is in playtest, has this. Modifius games that are doing like Conan and some other stuff, and then I know there's some other ones. The GM gets points to basically spend against the players. That seems to be a newer, or maybe not a new trend, but a trend that's growing in popularity. To give the GM, a little bit. Like, I literally have this resource of points that I can spend. So what was your thoughts on including that? Why does that appeal to you personally and as a designer?
Well, it's a great tool for taking the burden off of the scenario itself.
Right.
You mentioned the advantage and challenge dice. You mentioned heat. Those are sort of the two core mechanical systems in the game that are designed to shift a lot of the dramatic twists and turns out of the scenario's design itself and into the moment-to-moment gameplay. Again, like, getting rid of prep time, focusing more on what's happening at the table. And so the way it works is when you roll your, skill to see if you succeed or not, you also might roll advantage and challenge dice, which represent sort of positive and negative circumstances surrounding that roll. Mm-hmm. And then if you roll, say, the drawback symbols, which are on the challenge dice, that means, okay, maybe you succeeded, but there's some additional drawback. And so what that does is it means that, like, okay, we are constantly having this shifting landscape of, like, success and failure and upside and downside and, like, dramatic twists and turns. Then when you combine that with heat, which are like the points that the judge spends to introduce complications, what you're doing is you're basically saying to the judge, like, okay, you don't need to know in advance what all the things that could possibly go wrong here. I don't need to, when I design a scenario, plot out a bunch of twists and turns and, like, aha moments or whatever, because those are going to come out in gameplay.
So it becomes more spontaneous and organic.
Yeah. And so the thing is really nice about that is, I always used to say when I worked at Wizards, we would always talk about, like, the human resource of the dungeon master is one of the greatest advantages that role-playing games have, right? And what a judge or a game master or whatever can do is they can read that scene, read the moment, and know, like, okay, what would be interesting in this moment? Whereas if you try and plan that in advance in the scenario, maybe what is planned in advance doesn't really feel
it doesn't have the energy that you wanted to have when it actually happens, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
or maybe sometimes you're like, like, this scene is going along at a good clip. I'm not going to introduce this complication here because it's not that interesting, or because, like, I don't want to burst the player's bubble or whatever. Or maybe, like, you get to a slow moment and there wasn't anything planned for that moment. And you're like, okay, we got to spice this up. I'm going to throw in something right here to make things more exciting. So it puts a lot of, it gives the judge that opportunity to read the table and read the situation and tailor those dramatic beats up or down to that moment, as opposed to trying to plan it all in advance. So I think for Dusk City Outlaws, it's a win-win.
Yeah, well, I would guess, even though I haven't asked the question as directly to some other designers, that maybe that's why, like, these kind of threat points are getting more popular in role-playing games. Because I love to, like, when I run a game that has them, I use poker chips, and, like, that pile starts growing. The players are looking at it, like what's, it adds to the impending drama or the suspense or whatever, the tension. Yeah. So I'm trying to, I know you got to leave pretty soon. So
I do, yes.
Yeah, I want to just ask you one or two final questions and then again, thanks for your time. So the Kickstarter has funded. Yeah. Congratulations. But the more that we go along, the more scenarios and stuff that you can introduce as part of the game. Yeah. So people definitely, if you're interested in this, keep supporting the Kickstarter because you keep getting more scenarios. And if you support the Kickstarter, you get everything you need. You get it all. Boom, here it comes. And it's like a box set, and everything you need is right there to play. So it's a win-win. You get the spontaneity of a board game, but you get the deep, more narrative-rich storytelling and group storytelling of a role-playing game. So I got one final question for you.
Okay.
Is it too late, since you're doing stretch goals, is it too late to get an Italian Job style scenario that has the fantasy world equivalent of the Mini Cooper?
Well, I think the fantasy world equivalent of the Mini Cooper is a horse. Oh. Right? So,
oh man,
I think, I mean,
Well, no, you could do like little rickshaws. You could do little rickshaws that have racing stripes on them. Yeah.
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually just thinking about the Italian Job. I just watched the Michael Caine.
Yeah,
Italian
which is
Job
a great. If you're going to make a remake, that's a good one.
Yeah, and so I watched that one, and I was thinking about what is the equivalent in Dusk City Outlaws? And I think it's like a job where you have to steal a thoroughbred horse, right?
Yeah.
But it's in like a really public place, and trying to steal that horse would be really difficult because there's tons of witnesses around.
Yeah.
So you've got to create like this elaborate, complicated ruse to distract everybody from it. So that's definitely something that I'm considering for the game. And it's worth mentioning, talking about stretch goals. Now that the game is funded and we're into stretch goals, all of the stretch goals feed right back into the game. So basically, I'm taking any benefit I get from being able to print more copies, because every time you print more copies, the cost goes down.
Right.
I'm basically taking those cost savings and turning around and putting them right back into the game. So more art, more cards, more specialties, etc. Because
I'm going to support this. I mean, I was going to do it anyway, but I'm definitely doing it now. I'm supporting the Kickstarter because and people get it by the end of the year. The goal is December 2017. So Christmas present. I'm just saying, holiday present, whatever. All right, Rodney, man, I really appreciate your time. I want to respect your time and move you on. If you want to stay, you can. But I know you need to get back to something very important in your own life. And congratulations on that, by the way. I do have to do this, though. We have a tradition on the show called the Bad Joke of the Week, and I have to have a live victim. So can I run the Bad Joke of the Week by you?
Please hit me.
Okay, here we go. What's Count Dracula's favorite kind of boat?
Oh, man, I have no idea.
A blood vessel.
I'm going to tuck that one away. I'm going to do some bad jokes real soon.
That's exactly the reaction I was hoping for. Man, I really appreciate your time. If you have any projects in the future, reach out to me. I'd love to have you back on. You've been a pleasure to talk to. Congratulations both with your game and the stuff going on with your real life. And I'll keep an eye on that Kickstarter.
Hey, Shane, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure being here.
Yeah, thank you, Rodney, and we'll talk to you later.
All right,
Zach, take us actually, I'm going to give Game Goblins some love. Then we're going to go to break. We'll come back. We'll do a quick news segment and wrap up the show. Some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. That's 501-224-GAME or gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space, because Game Goblins has gaming events every day of the week. For all your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers, mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into things we love. We were talking with Rodney Thompson, game designer, and he's got a new Kickstarter out there called Dusk City Outlaws, so go check that out. Rodney had to drop for real world stuff, real life stuff. It's good for him. And I was glad that he gave us some time for the show today. We're going to do a news segment and wrap up the show here, and then we will move on. Now, next week, folks, we've got Neil Adams, the Neil Adams, comic book legend, barely does the word credit, living legend, comic book artist, influential person in the industry, big time. And I interviewed him about something. We talk a little bit about comic books, but he's also got an interest in geology, and he has a really interesting theory on geology, which some might say is science fiction and falls into the realm of comic books, and some people might say, oh, it makes sense. So make sure to tune in next week for that. He was a really nice guy, and I enjoyed talking with him. Now, got some news items here that we're going to go through, and I guess, Zach, go ahead and turn on that microphone in the newsroom there, pal. There they go. Working hard on a Saturday. So let's see if we can do this news segment in 5 minutes. I bet you we can. First, and this is sad news. Too much sad news here lately in the world of geekdom. Loren Wiseman has passed away. And I'll be honest, I didn't know who Loren was till I heard about him passing away. But for me personally, and for many role-playing game folks, this is sad. Family and industry friends are reporting, and this is from Ian World. Family and industry friends are reporting that seminal game designer Loren Wiseman has passed away. The exact cause of death is not known, but he has had long-term health issues. Now, for people who are into role-playing games, especially know the history of role-playing games, he was very prominent figure. He co-founded Game Designers Workshop with Frank Chadwick, Rich Banner, and Mark Miller in 1973. Game Designers Workshop was a big name in the first couple of decades of gaming or role-playing gaming, and he co-designed, this to me personally is big, he co-designed Traveler with Mark Miller and others. After GDW closed in the mid-90s, he joined Steve Jackson Games, which is another big name in role-playing, and he ended up developing and writing the GURPS edition of Traveler. He was the Traveler guru for Steve Jackson Games until the GURPS Traveler line was discontinued in 2015. And I think there's another version of Traveler out there now. The reason this is big for me personally, although I love a lot of role-playing games, the first role-playing game I can ever remember playing in the early 80s was actually Traveler. So this is a personal, story, hits me kind of personal. Of course I played D&D later, and I had a deep love of Village and Vigilantes as an early role-playing game, and I played Middle-earth role-playing. My very first role-playing game that I can ever remember playing is Traveler. And I remember going over to my friend Carrie Levrier, I'm going to say that again, Carrie Levrier's house, Little Rock Air Force Base, Jacksonville, Arkansas, back in the 80s. And I had made up a game, and I took it over to show it to him, and he's like, oh, that's really neat. And he's like, let me tell you about this Traveler game. And I was just blown away, and we practically made up the rules all day long based on what he remembered of playing it, but we had so much fun. And I also remember buying the little Traveler rule books that were little black books that had a colored line on them, and Traveler has a special place in my heart. So for the friends and family and role players out there that benefited from Loren Wiseman, we're going to miss him. And I've had too many of these lately, but I'm going to do another moment of silence for Loren Wiseman. Okay, and that moment of silence was for Loren Wiseman, co-founder of Game Designers Workshop and co-designer of the Traveler role-playing game. Now, this other news item is also from Ian World, and we've had Morris on the show before, Russ Morrissey, talking about his Wine, What's Old is New role-playing game system. Well, there's the Worlds of 2000 AD with a new Judge Dredd in the Worlds of 2000 AD role-playing game is coming, and it's going to use the Wine role-playing game system to power it. So, the Judge Dredd and Rogue Trooper and all these other properties that have been in 2000 AD, which was like the super long-running comic anthology out of Britain, has launched some really cool creative stuff, is coming. And I know there's been some previous editions of the 2000 AD or the Judge Dredd role-playing game that people don't like, but based on what I understand of the What's Old is New role-playing system, this should be really cool. So I just wanted to make people aware of that. Now, the last news item I have here is, and it looks like this has already met enough interest to be approved. I'm not really sure how this works, but there is Lego, and the link is on the show notes at shaneplays.com. Lego has this thing called Lego Ideas, and people can propose an idea for a Lego set, and if it gets enough interest, then Lego will approve it and manufacture it and put it in stores. And we have, there's a guy, go to the Shane Plays or search for Dungeon Master Lego. There's a guy out there wanting to do a blend between Lego and a D&D style role-playing game. And it's called Dungeon Master. And it's already got 10,000 supporters. So it's achieved support, but it hasn't been approved yet. So maybe, if you're interested, keep this on your radar. Maybe contact Lego and say that you want this. But D&D and role-playing games and Lego are two deep loves of geekdom, and putting them together just makes sense to me. So go check that out. It's the Dungeon Master Lego idea. Again, all of these news stories are linked at shaneplays.com on the show notes. All right, Zach, that's going to do us for this week. Zach, thanks for producing the show. I told Zach I'll go through the new Power Rangers movie with him, because he's all about Power Rangers, and I could care less. But we're gonna go together. Y'all have a great week, and we will check you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. You're only supposed to blow the bloody doors off. Typical, isn't it? I've been out of jail 5 minutes and already I'm in a hot car.
This is the South Society.
$4 million through a traffic jam.
Croker can handle it. Now, it's a very difficult job, and the only way to get through it is we all work together as a team. And that means you do everything I say.
We need an expert in computers.
Wait till you see them Italian birds.
Aren't they big? I like them big. Big!
There's even a football match, England versus Italy.
Oh, look, Happy, you stupid bastard. We won, didn't we? The Mafia. They'll be waiting for you. Pretty car. You just lost him his insurance bonus.
Now, what would you like?
Everything. In this country, they drive on the wrong side of the road.
Well, I hope he likes spaghetti.
We are about to do a job in Italy.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.